Welcome to the life you crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Leah Pinelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started.
Hello, friends. Today, we are talking about the problem with the scale. And now, first and foremost, I have to say that for the last 6 years that I have helped women to stop overeating and release unwanted weight, I've actually been a big proponent of the scale. In fact, I advise my clients to weigh themselves on their scale every single day, myself included. I would do that as well. And you might be thinking, why would you do that, Leah? Well, first of all, the main reason that we do that is because I think it's super important to desensitize ourselves from the number on the scale meaning something, right? Like it doesn't really mean anything, but of course we make it mean something. The second reason, which is probably the bigger reason to be honest, is because our weight on the scale fluctuates. It can, I have actually seen my weight fluctuate 6 pounds in a week. Right. And I've had other clients who actually have one client who says she's seen her weight fluctuate 10 pounds in that sort of period of time. The reason being is that our bodies hold water. Our bodies are doing so many other things besides just, the basics. So what ends up happening is that number on the scale isn't actually representative of what you actually weigh, quote unquote. If you've had takeout Chinese food the night before, right? You might be retaining some water. I know for me, that happens when we eat sushi. And so when you weigh yourself every day, what you find is that you kind of get used to your weight just going up and down, within usually a 5-pound range, but you get used to it. And the reason that's so important is because, back in the day when I used to do every single diet in the book, like Weight Watchers and things like that, they often would do a weekly weigh-in. How many of you guys remember that? The weekly Weight Watchers weigh-in. Well, the problem with that is it could have been, if I'm weighing in on a Wednesday, it could have been that all week up until that Wednesday, I was weighing, back then I was weighing 180 pounds all week and then Wednesday, maybe I had something to eat the night before that was causing some water retention or whatever other reason. And next thing I know, that next day, I'm 183. My weight is up 3 pounds. Well, if you hadn't been weighing, you might actually think that you'd gained 3 pounds in the last week. But really, you're going to get back on the scale again tomorrow and see that, oh my gosh, it's already back down to 181. This is literally what happens. Our weight fluctuates in what I call like a 5-pound range, and it can go up and down. And the way that you can kind of tell what you really weigh is by just noticing what are the numbers that you're seeing the most often. That is what you weigh. So that is what I would have my clients do and what I had done for years. And it was fine. It worked. I'm a data person. I like to collect data. And so stepping on the scale let me know if my patterns of eating were creating the result that I wanted or not. So I always feel like the more data, the better. The scale is a tool that gives me some really good data about how I'm eating and how it's having an impact on my body. That is until this past year or so, when I started to experience some significant medical health issues. And there was a lot of question marks, a lot of testing, all this stuff going on. I'm not going to get into all of it here, but I became quite, first of all, I was quite happy that I had collected this data of my weight on a smart scale for the last 4 years. So I've used the same smart scale for 4 years. And before, I only paid attention to the number, the weight on the scale. But now what I realized, I'm 46 years old, which means that I am venturing into the perimenopausal stage. And what I realized is that data that my smart scale has been collecting, not about the number that I weigh, but about my muscle mass and my visceral fat and all of this other data. Visceral fat, by the way, you guys, is the fat that can accumulate around your organs. It is considered the most dangerous fat. And is often represented by the bigger our bellies, the more visceral fat we often have. By the way, I am not a medical professional, so please accept this podcast as me sharing my experience and the recommendations that I make to my clients, but not as medical advice. But my scale is actually able to give me some data. Now, some people might say, "Well, I don't know how accurate it is," and I can tell you a little bit about that in just a second. But it turned out that I ended up having all of this data around how much muscle mass did I have in 2020 compared to 2024. Well, in 2020, I was 4 years younger. I was 42. I wasn't really thinking very much about muscle mass back then. At 46, I started to really think about muscle mass because I started to understand, as I started to develop some health issues, that the amount of muscle that I had in my body would make a really big difference in terms of my overall health from this point on. So now I'm really interested in data beyond just the number on the scale. And it was great to see, for example, that from 2020 to 2024, I've actually gained 3 pounds of muscle, which, you might think that's not very much, Leah, in 4 years. But the reason that is so important to know is because, and I'm going to quote this, you gradually begin losing muscle mass and strength sometime in your 30s or 40s. This is a quote from the Cleveland Clinic, by the way. This process picks up between the ages of 65 and 80. Rates vary, but you may lose as much as 8% of your muscle mass each decade. 8% each decade. It says here, everyone loses muscle mass over time, but people with sarcopenia lose it even more quickly. Sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass as it goes. So this is why this is so important. Here I am aging into perimenopause, which is when we typically will really start to, as women, lose muscle mass if we don't do something about it. But I've actually gained 3 pounds of muscle, right? So not only did that feel gratifying, but it also felt motivating. It made me want to go out and keep building muscle. It made me want to actually think about, how can I even build more muscle, right? I don't want to lose 8% of my muscle mass a decade. And in fact, the more muscle we have, there are so many benefits to it. I could do an entire podcast on the benefits of muscle building, but I think for most of my listeners, you probably already know that building muscle, particularly for women after 40, is critical and crucial for our health. So what does this have to do with the scale? Well, there are all these cool smart scales out there. I've tried out a bunch of different ones, and to be honest with you, the one that I found to be the most accurate is my Renpho scale. I am not an affiliate. I'm not getting any money from this, but you can get a Renpho scale, Renpho, on Amazon for like $20 or something. It's the cheapest scale. I had a client tell me about it years ago, and that's the one I used. I know that it's one of the most accurate because I've also tested other scales. And then I went and did a what's called an in-body test. You can do these in-body tests sometimes at gyms. My friend Robin Eckersley told me about it. I did mine at Orange Theory. But you stand on this machine and it reads electromagnetically what's going on in terms of your visceral fat, your muscle mass, your body fat, your body water, all of those measurements. So then I took the printout that I got from that and I brought it home and I compared it to what my Renpho scale was telling me and actually to what the other scales, I won't go into which other scales I was testing, and it turned out that they were all pretty close. Like there was nothing that was like, drastically different. But my Renpho scale was actually the closest. So I was like, sweet, I'm gonna stick with this $20 scale and keep recommending it to my clients. But the difference is before I used to tell my clients to just pay attention to the number on the scale because I wasn't sure how accurate all of those other measurements were. And now I feel pretty confident to say, you don't even need to stand on the scale to see your body weight. Like, let's actually stand on the scale to see your muscle mass and your body fat percentage, if that's something that is of concern to you. So the idea behind weighing yourself as data, as having some kind of indication of your health or even your weight loss, for those of you who are on a weight loss journey, that number on the scale is not very helpful, especially if you are actively building muscle at the same time. So if you're somebody who's like, I've started to work out, I'm doing some strength training, right? You might actually find that the number on the scale is going up despite your best efforts to eat differently, which can be so infuriating and frustrating. And this is often when people get a case of what I call the F-its. And the F-its are, oh, well, F it. I've been working so hard. I've been working out. I've been eating differently and my weight's going up. Like, forget it. I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. It doesn't feel like it's worth it. But when you actually can see, oh, this is what my body, my muscle mass is doing, and this is what my body fat is doing in terms of shifts and changes, that can really make a difference in terms of being a motivating factor. Not to mention, it's way more accurate and, in my opinion, way more interesting, right? Now, here's another piece of news. I wanted to say the good news, but the truth is you don't actually need to step on a smart scale, even if it is only $20 on Amazon. You don't actually need to step on a smart scale in order to gather this data. Now, you might not get this exact same data if I know exactly how many pounds of muscle mass I have versus my percentage of body fat, but a better way to actually measure your body fat, whether or not it's increasing or decreasing, is to use a measuring tape. And actually, for those of you who are watching me on YouTube right now, I just got this measuring tape also on Amazon. It is called the Perfect Measuring Tape Company. Again, I am not an affiliate, but geez, maybe I should be. But it is a really cool measuring tape because if you can hear it if you're listening to the podcast, you pull it out, you measure, it doesn't automatically retract, but then you can clip it right in there so it will, and then you can push this middle button and it will move itself so that you get a really accurate measurement. I didn't do a great job of articulating that, but you can see it on YouTube for those of you who are watching. So measuring is actually a far better indicator of your body fat increase, decrease, and also there's something called a waist to hip ratio. I'm going to pause on that for just a second and say there are lots of body parts that you can measure. You can measure your neck, you can measure your arms, you can measure your thighs, you can measure your waist, you can measure all the things, forearms, upper arms, right? It just depends on how involved you want to get. I'm kind of a less is more type of person. I really feel like women have better things to do than worry about things like this. But overall health does state that our waist to hip ratio really does make a difference in our longevity, in our health as we age. And so your waist to hip ratio really matters. So if there's if you're just going to measure two things and thinking about it in terms of reducing body fat, for those of you that is a priority, you simply just measure your waist and your hip. I usually, in your hips, you measure the smallest part of your waist and the widest part of your hips. I recommend that if you're going to do this, you do it once a week. You don't need to do it every day. Do it once a week, pick a day of the week, measure yourself, record it somewhere. Ideally, you're recording it somewhere electronic because it really helps, like I said, when you are talking to doctors about your own medical stuff. If that ever comes up, it's just helpful to have data in that format. But here's the best part about it is it measures the same thing, right? All you're looking for is a trend. Unlike your scale, you're simply looking for a trend. If you are looking to reduce your body fat percentage, then you simply just want to see that each week or every few weeks, actually, you shouldn't expect that the number is going to change every week, but you want to see over time, let's say over 2-3 months, you want to see that your measurement is going down, either in your waist or your hips or both. And you want to see that ratio shift over time. And that's how you know, oh, what I'm doing is working. It doesn't matter what the number on the scale says, because that's not measuring my bone weight. It's not telling me about, if I remove my skeleton, how much do I weigh, right? It's not telling us anything about that. But the waist to hip ratio is going to be very specific to your body fat percentage and simply letting you know, is it moving in the direction that you want it to be moving in? That's what I love about the tape measure. But what I love even more, and I had a client say this to me just this week, she said she was choosing to stop weighing herself and to just start measuring. And she said, because she doesn't have any kind of negative association with the number on the tape. Like, it doesn't mean anything, right? She doesn't have some idea from some BMI about what that number is, quote unquote, supposed to be. All she cares about is, this is my starting number, and I just want to see that number go down over time. I love that, right? We don't necessarily have all of this baggage around the measuring tape. So that's another reason why I love it. And then the last thing I'll say about the measuring tape is I have another client who likes to measure and also likes to take photos of herself once a month, full body photos, because she gets motivated when she sees those shifts in her body thanks to exercise and shifting how she's eating. You'll notice that both of those clients that I just referred to, they both feel motivated by measuring and taking photos. They feel empowered by measuring and taking photos. They do not feel diminished and defeated and shameful. And it is so important. If you take nothing else from this podcast today, it is so important that what you actually pay attention to is not the number on the measuring tape. It's not the picture that you took of yourself. It's not the number on the scale. It's actually how you feel when you are collecting this data. And if you feel awful, you have two choices. You can either stop doing it, just stop collecting the data, but that might not get you the result you want. And the other option is that you reach out to a professional to support you with this. And I don't mean a professional health coach who can support you with your weight loss. I'm talking about a professional who can help you emotionally support you through this process of wanting to reduce body fat percentage, but also not wanting to feel like shit while you do it, right? That is so important. You can always reach out to me, leahpinelli.com, and set up a time to chat. I would love to support you through this process, as I have supported so many women up until now. The other thing that I really want to encourage you to do, if you do nothing else, if you're not interested in losing body fat, or if it's just not something you want to measure, please track your muscle mass. Please track the growth of your muscle, especially if you're a woman after 40, because you might think what you're doing is actually building the muscle that you need long-term, and it might not quite be hitting the mark, or vice versa. It might be that you're totally hitting the mark, right? And you might decide you want to pull back a little bit or switch it up or do something different, but you will pay off in dividends if you allow yourself to not only build that muscle mass, but track it as well. And again, tracking it does not have to be time consuming. It can literally be stepping on an in-body scale once every 3 months. That will be enough tracking that you need to see if what you're doing is working, or it's stepping on your smart scale at home, again, like once every 3 months. I mean, that would totally work if you're just looking at what building muscle mass and whether or not what you're doing is working. The last thing that I wanted to say, actually, before I say the last thing I want to say, let me tell you that there is another alternative that I just want to mention here. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't, is that there is a scale out there that not a lot of people know about, and it's called the Shapa scale, SHAPA. Again, not an affiliate, but it is something that I recommend to clients, and it is a numberless scale. And what that means is it actually glows a color when you step on it. So when you get your Shapa scale for the first time, you step on it for every day for 10 days, and it glows gray. And what it's doing is this is what I love about this scale. It is collecting your 10 days of data and then recording, not for you to see, but recording your average weight during that 10 days. Because remember, I said at the top of the podcast, your weight can fluctuate by a few pounds every day. So the Shapa takes the average of the first 10 days for it's a much more accurate measure of what you actually weigh. It never tells you what you weigh. You can choose the option to see what you weigh, but you don't have to. And most of my clients never do. But then what it does is it glows. Let me see if I remember this. It glows green if you're maintaining your weight. So every day you step on it, and it'll glow green if your weight is staying about the same. It will glow blue and eventually even teal if your weight is decreasing. And then it will glow, what's the color it glows if you're gaining? Maybe it's gray. I can't remember, but there is a color that it grows if you're gaining. My clients who use this love this scale because it's not loaded, right? Like I had a client who just came back from like not weighing herself for 3 or 4 months, and she was on vacation and she was having this amazing time. And she's like, oh my God, I'm dreading getting back on the scale. But then when she remembered that she was getting back on her Shapa scale, she was like, oh, no problem, right? Like she got on the scale. It's going to glow gray for 10 days because it has to calibrate for her. And then it's just going to give her a color. She's not even going to know if she gained weight since January. She's just going to know now from this point whether she's gaining or losing. So it's a really effective scale in terms of taking the emotionality out of it. The other thing is you can actually see your actual weights if you choose to. Also, there's an app that you can go in. You can see all of the weights that you ever were, that were logged. So it's not like if you were going to the doctor and you wanted to have a conversation about this, that you wouldn't have the record of your actual weights, that it is stored in the Shapa app. So it's a really cool one. You can check it. It's way more pricey than that Renpho that I was talking about, but it is it's well worth it, I think, mental health wise. All right, you guys, here is the final takeaway. And this is what I really hope that if you're listening today and you've gotten all the way to this point, this is what I really hope you take from this podcast today. It's this. If you are over the age of 40 and you are eating in alignment, and what I mean by that is you're eating in ways that feel good to you, it feels healthy to you, you're not overeating, you're not stuffing yourself, you're not having really strong cravings, you feel good about your relationship with food, and you're building muscle, then girl, you are set. You are set. Those are the two things you need to do, right? Beautiful relationship with food, beautiful relationship with muscle building. You are set in terms of really setting yourself up well for the next third of your life. Because by the way, you guys, once we hit menopause, we still have a third of our life to go. You know, for some of us, we still have maybe half of our lives to go. But the other thing that I want you to take away here is that measuring and muscle building have the potential to actually be a motivating positive factor when it comes to the transformation of your body, as opposed to being a demotivating and shameful factor in terms of really enhancing your whole health and your whole experience. So thank you all so much for listening. I will make sure to have links in the show notes to the 2 scales that I mentioned and that measuring tape. And I would love to hear, do you weigh yourself? Do you not weigh yourself? Tell me why or why not. And tell me the ways that you love to collect your own data. Ciao.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at leahpinelli.com. That's LIAPINELLI.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.